Hello, magical people. I am Luminix. Welcome to my channel. Today's video is going to be about MBTI, which is otherwise known as the Myers-Briggs Typology Indicator. And this video is actually in response to a comment that I received. So I'm going to read that comment to you now. Hi, I saw your typology with Eric on his channel a while back, and I was wondering if you would be able to give me some advice on finding my cognitive function stack. I feel as though I'm an INFJ, but I'm also open to the possibility of INFP, INTP, and ISFP. I don't want to be a bother, but if you have some spare time, I would really find it valuable to know how NI, FE, TI, and SE manifest in your daily life as an INFJ. Thank you. So thank you, commenter. I didn't want to name you specifically because I didn't ask your permission to do so, but I do really appreciate your comment, and if anybody else has any, whether it's tarot related or not, but if anybody else has any questions about things they'd like me to do a video on, please feel free to reach out and make the suggestion. Oh, I just realized the heat is about to kick on, so my apologies for the background noise that is likely to cause. Okay, so I had, first of all, a few caveats or initial thoughts that I wanted to get out of the way. And one of them is, okay, so, and pardon me, I have my little notebook here, so I will be consulting it. So initial thoughts are, one, I'm not an expert, obviously. I find MBTI, Jungian typology, and psychology in general is one of my special interests that I've been following for a long time because people are neat. But I am not an expert and have no special education in any of those subjects. Caveat number two, or initial thought number two, I might not be an INFJ. I have been typed. I do believe that my typing was accurate, and nobody has ever pushed back on it, I don't think, that I'm aware of. But having said that, who knows? I'm definitely open to the possibility. If somebody wants to make an argument that I am some other type, then I'm certainly open to it. It's not, yeah, so there's that. Let's see, other factors are, we are all individual creatures, and there are various things that color the way we show up in the world, whether it's personality-wise, behavior-wise, affect, all of that. And for me, again, because I'm not an expert, sometimes I do find it difficult, particularly with regards to myself, it's a little bit difficult to tease out what might be inherently INFJ stuff, and what might be one of these other factors. So some of these other factors are enneagram. Enneagram is another sort of personality system that is, I find, a nice little overlay or add-on to the MBTI. Kind of speaks more to maybe our defensive structures or our attachment styles, or, and again, a lot of this is kind of a moving art / science that is still continuing to evolve. But so for Enneagram, my tri-type, in case anybody is curious, is, I believe, anyways, 947 is where I'm resting right now with that. So there's Enneagram. There's also the fact that I have cptsd. If you're not familiar with the ACEs score, it stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences, and my score is pretty high, which, since some of those traumas were when I was pre-verbal, that certainly impacted the way that my brain developed. So again, it's not like one of those things where I have a before and after of, and I can clearly delineate what was the initial writing of me and what was overwritten by trauma. I have no way to separate it out. Also, I've had some mental health stuff in the past, specifically anxiety. The past few years, depression's kind of showed up. That's sort of situationally appropriate, but generally speaking, I think more anxiety, a little bit of dissociation has kind of been where my mental health struggles have kind of shown up. Also, another factor is that I was socialized as a girl. And I don't know a ton of INFJs, but I've had the opportunity to meet a few. a couple who are afab, assigned female at birth, socialized as girls, and a couple who are amab, assigned male at birth or socialized as boys. And I think comparatively, it is interesting that the boys do seem to, or the men, the males, do seem to have a little bit more of a sharper edge. Like there have been times when I've thought that they were being rude in a way it wouldn't usually occur to me to be unless there was a real significant reason for it. So that, I think, is likely chalked up to just the societal and social expectations that are made on girls in terms of what's acceptable, how loud we're allowed to be, how much we're allowed to push back, and blah, blah. So I say that only because, particularly with FE showing up in the front stack, I think that that is something that is likely shaped about or honed. The way that that manifests in a person is, in addition to their cognitive fact, certainly also shaped in some ways by actual experience. Let's see. Next initial thought is that functions, we never get to see them in their pure form. So when somebody says that that NE is this, oftentimes people will describe behaviors or keywords or code words, and that can be helpful, but I think it is also important to remember that we never actually in the real world get to see a pure version of what any singular function looks like, because our brains are working as a cohesive whole. And so even though you might be dominant in one function, I subscribe or ascribe, whatever, to the 8 function model. So I am of the opinion that we all have access to all 8 cognitive functions, and that we do in fact use all 8 of them on a regular basis. So because we have all of the functions and we all use them, and there's no way to just pull out that piece from the puzzle and look at it in and of its own, we have no choice but to look at that puzzle within the scope of or that puzzle piece within the landscape of the larger puzzle. So I think that's just important to keep in mind. Let's see, when I was initially thinking of this, actually, I was kind of thinking of like gears in a clock, and how all clocks have gears in them. If you're thinking about a mechanical clock, please don't come at me in the comments talking about digital clocks. But if you're talking about an old school clock that works mechanically, they all have gears and springs in them, so they are all made up of the basic same components. But of course, the way those components are arranged can have a striking difference on the final product. So, okay, another initial thought that I had was regarding conscious versus subconscious. There are lots of theories out there, like Host Eric, who is the Eric that is referred to in the comment, which is the channel Talking with Famous People. I meant to mention that way earlier, but I forgot, so my bad. But I think he describes it something more or less along the lines of, the higher it is in your function, the higher it is in your function stack, the more close to the surface it is, the more likely you are going to have the ability to recall instances of using that function. Or that's obviously not verbatim, so Eric, if you watch this and if I got that wrong, apologies. I didn't intentionally misrepresent your words. There is another person out there, I think their channel is called Another Majestic INFJ, which I think is kind of funny. And I really have seen some of his videos and really like his content. And the way that he described conscious versus subconscious was that it has nothing to do, like, just kind of forget those 2 words altogether, and instead look at your function stack as that things that are at the top of your function stack, your first and your second function, are going to require less conscious effort and maintenance. So that's more like the idea of breathing. Whereas like it's more, what's that word? Autonomous? Yep, don't know. Anyways, but it's a function that happens without really having to pay attention to it. Heart beating is another example of that. Whereas if it is a function that is lower in the stack, essentially what that means is it's going to require more energy. It's going to take more power, more effort, more attentional spectrum in order to utilize that function. And again, that's not verbatim, and I don't know this gentleman's name, so my apologies if you should, for some random reason, end up seeing this video and I misinterpreted or relayed your words in any way. That was not my intention. But yeah, go check out Talking with Famous People. Go check out another majestic INFJ if you want more info on that. So okay, so let's see. Let me check my notes here. So now I think that was it for my initial thoughts. Now, I will run through the function stack of an INFJ and sort of, I guess, talk a little bit about how I feel like that shows up in my daily life. Yeah. We'll see how this goes. So a lot of people refer to NI, well, a lot of people, myself included, have a hard time describing what it is. And I guess in some sense, in some ways, also have a hard time understanding what it is, because it's kind of like, a fish doesn't recognize the water that it swims in. So I think sometimes it's a little bit difficult for a person to see their top function very clearly, because you're just always so in it. But I think NI in particular as a function is one that is particularly challenging for people to describe, because it is abstract in its nature and it deals with abstractions. It also deals with visuals, and there have been plenty of NI people that I've come across who have a very strong internal visual landscape. And how that kind of shows up for me is that there are times, particularly if I'm trying to explain something that I either have deep feelings about or something that is a little bit complex or nuanced, and I'm just not quite getting it, getting across what I'm wanting to get across. A lot of times I'll find it easier to sort of describe the image that is in my mind rather than relying on finding the accurate words. So I'm sort of like, kind of, I don't really know a better way to put that. So we're just going to leave that there for now. Some people also refer to this function as being very concise. It is a knowing function. It is a perceiving function. So it is taking in information. And a lot of times what I've noticed about myself, and I would be curious if other INFJs find this as well, is that even when I don't voice claims or thoughts or things like that, I very often internally jump to conclusions with not a whole lot of data, like a data point or two, and I'll think I have it all figured out. Because I am 49, which I should have put on there too, as a caveat for initial thoughts, is that I am 49. And so if you would ask me this question 20 years ago, my answers probably would have been very different. And so I do think that as we get older and learn how to drive the vehicle better, including the brain, and have more ability to sort of spend our attention spend our attention on other functions that aren't at the very top of our stack. I think that that's just something that, as with most things with time, you get a little bit of mastery. So even if it's something that you're not very good at, it's likely that you're less not very good at it as an older person than you are as a younger person. So anyways, back to what I was saying. So jumping into conclusions, I find I do this a lot, and I think I probably used to be a bit more, I think maybe when I was very young, it's possible that I was probably a bit more vocal with putting those sort of thoughts and like guesses, I guess, out into the world, and I kind of found that it sometimes wasn't very well received. Yeah, so I try to, again, with age, if you're lucky, comes at least a little bit of wisdom, and I've tried to hone that line of discernment between believing the things that I think I know and allowing to remain a certain openness so I don't become too rigid in that belief. I think that I was definitely a lot more rigid in believing my rightness when I was younger. And I still believe in my rightness, but I'm also open to the possibility that if somebody can I'm open to the possibility of being wrong in part or in whole about certain things. But I am also still pretty stubborn. So that's kind of, sort of NI in a nutshell. And I do find that I do often find in visuals, I think another thing about NI, because it's all on an axis, is if you have NI at the top, you have SE at the bottom in terms of your top 4 functions. And so there has, and again, hard to say if this is an INFJ thing or not, but what I have sort of had reflected back to me is that there is a certain aspect of not quite there-ness to me sometimes. And I've definitely noticed that in myself as I've gotten older, is that it is very difficult for me to actually fully be anywhere unless I'm really trying. So there's that. Let's see. So FE, tool function, second function. So it's instrumental. That's vibes management. That's awareness of sort of your impact on the space around you, emotionally or otherwise, as well as sort of management of the, what's it called? Yeah, it's like relationship management in a way. And it does definitely have a pretty big performative aspect to it, which does not mean that it is fake or inauthentic. I sometimes have heard people with FI higher in their stack than FE indicate that FE is just very fake. And I agree that it can probably come across that way at times, but I don't think that it is that way inherently. I think that it's more that, for me anyways, it's harder to figure out how I actually feel about things when there's other people to be considered. Which that's a terrible way of putting that. What's another way of putting that? So say hanging out with some friends and everybody gets really excited about going and getting ice cream. Okay, ice cream's not probably a very good example because I also would pretty much always be super excited to go get ice cream. But anyways, let's just say that I'm with some friends and everybody wants to go get ice cream. It won't even occur to me to consider whether or not I want ice cream. So it's not like I'm being inauthentic to the desire as to whether or not I want ice cream at all. It's that it doesn't even occur to me. Like, that's not where I go first. Again, as I've gotten older, I have learned to, I've gotten burned by FE. Not everybody is trustworthy. Not everybody has your best interests at heart. And FE can absolutely be used as a weapon against you. And it's really unfortunate and awful when that happens. And I think it happens quite often to people. But as I've gotten older, I have learned from that and learned to check in a little bit more with, it doesn't matter with something as silly as going to get ice cream, but that's just a metaphor for every other sort of situation. So it's like I said, it's not inauthentic. It's more that, like, well, everybody wants ice cream. I want ice cream. Let's get ice cream. And then maybe I'll get there and I won't get anything because I don't actually want ice cream. But even then, it's like it takes some time for that to show up. I've also found as I've gotten older and as I'm in a place where I've lived alone several times over the last few years. I'm living alone right now and I really love it. That also has kind of shown me in some ways how much of my world-facing self is somewhat performative. For example, I always clean before I do a video. I had a couple of friends coming by on different days last week, and I did spend a fair amount of time sort of cleaning the space. So which is a nice thing to do. There is a darker side to it, which is that there have been times where either physically or metaphorically, I put forward this, like, especially in the last few years, which have been particularly painful for me. I have definitely noticed that as I've gone through these really intense grief cycles, like I do tend to isolate a little bit during them, because part of me recognizes that nobody can help me with this. This is just pain that I need to experience. It just needs to be born. There's there's nothing that anybody can say or do that's going to alleviate it. And I'm not saying this is right. This is just my thought process. So I'm not giving this to anybody if they don't want it. But there is a part of me that is hyper aware. Like if I'm sad, that makes other people sad. And then I'm bearing not only my own sadness, but the discomfort of having inflicted that sadness on somebody else. And that, like FE rather, I think in some ways, especially if you pair with it being the tool function and then you throw the Enneagram 9 on top of that, I think it does sometimes show up as being self-interested in the way that it wants to maintain the status quo. It doesn't want to rock the boat. So TI, words matter. Words matter. Words matter. But because it's third, I'm also pretty sloppy with them sometimes, so I try. And TI is often known as, conditional logic or what the fuck did I write down there? Internally consistent logic. I try and think things through. Fact is, I'm just not that smart, and I kind of struggle to get past a certain point. Writing things down does help me. I also am somewhat resistant to that, but that I think is probably more perhaps a mental health thing, maybe. I don't know. Let's see. SE fourth. Oh, SE fourth. SE aspirational. There's lots of things that I want to do. I want to have more impact in the world than I actually manage to. But it is like a desire, because it's kind of like if you're not putting it out in the world, it's an instrumental for INFJ. It's like the doing of the thing isn't for the purpose of the doing of the thing. The doing of the thing is to bring, the vision into the world in whatever large or small way that means. So now I'm just going to run through the back stack, just kind of a little quicker. So any ignoring, for me, that shows up as like, oh my God, if somebody wants to do a brainstorming session, okay, so if there is no need for a brainstorming session and there's absolutely no pressure, I might occasionally get this fun little, moment. But if there is any pressure to perform and if I'm supposed to participate in a brainstorming session, or like when I did typology, or when I've done typings with people, and they've been any tests, like I'm not as good as it as I would like to be. And I think when I was younger, I didn't even really want to be. Like, I think it's one of the functions that I've maybe become more admiring of as I've gotten older. So FI6 is a bitch, man. Like, I think having FI and SI at the back stack, I struggle to have a subjective understanding of myself, which sounds utterly fucking ridiculous, but is also 100% true. And feelings, like I said, I've been through it these last few years, and feelings are hard, but apparently you have to have them. Okay, so TE poLr. This one, I just wanted to let you know, this is the third time I've made this video. So last night, I made this video. It was like, I don't know, 35, 39 minutes long. Said a bunch of stuff. Don't remember most of it. Some of it I've probably said here today. Some of it I probably haven't. And then realized that my computer wasn't plugged in. And I got the notification that my computer was about to die. So I tried to plug it in real quick. Totally missed the boat on it. So computer shuts down. I'm like, okay, fine. I'll just take a break. I'll finish recording that video after. That'll be a little hee-hee TE poLr moment. Oh, but that's not even it. Then when I went to start the app back up after my computer turned itself back on, after it got a little bit of juice in it, I realized that because the video that I made before last week, I had used my earbuds, and I am not using them this time, and I forgot to switch the audio input and turn the one off and the other back on. It was an entire 35 or so minute video of me gestating and emoting and talking and saying things with my mouth, but there was absolutely no sound. And that is I mean, it's not always that I waste an hour a day doing stupid shit, but that sort of thing happens pretty frequently. Just forgetting an integral step, even if it's something that I already know how to do, just forgetting. I think this is probably maybe TESE, but or maybe SI too, I don't even know. But I'm very, very bad at time management. I often way underestimate the amount of time that things will take me. So, all right. So we're already almost a half an hour in, or over 20 minutes. I think I had some time at the beginning. So so that's kind of like me running through just off the cuff, running through how, I think that I see those functions show up to me. The making of this video is a pretty good indication of FE tool. I wouldn't have made this video, would not have thought to make this video, or probably even any MBTI video, if somebody hadn't asked. It's a little nerve-wracking for me to step into something that so many people have such big opinions on, but yeah, here I am. So I think that's probably a pretty good indication of NI as well, or FE as well. So to get to the advice aspect of this, dear commenter, so if you're looking yourself, it's helpful, I think, sometimes our poLrs, our points of least resistance, are sometimes a little bit easier for us to see. And for your types, you had said INFJ, so it's TE poLr, or INTP, which is SE poLr, INFP, which is also SE poLr, and ISFP, which is NE poLr. So I can see how a poLr and a fourth place position sometimes might look similar if you're trying to look only at the functions in and of themselves. But what I thought was, well, actually, I'm not going to get there. I'll get back to that spot. So yeah, if you can try and see your poLr, the thing that you consistently fuck up. And if you are an INFJ, I will say that some people from the outside would probably look at me and maybe question my INFJ-ness, because I am actually pretty independent. I'm pretty competent. I can kind of do a lot of shit, and I'm not trying to sound like I can toot my own horn, but I'm pretty capable in a lot of ways. I'm utterly fucking useless in plenty of other ways, but those ways are a little bit harder to see, I think, because I'm good at managing the vibe that I put out there. But I would say that if I had been born at a time without access to the internet, I'd have been fucked, because I Google how to do shit, or what is this and how to do this all the fucking time. And even with that, I still often will mismanage time, miss an integral step, somehow just fuck it up along the way. So if you can let your poLr, that's pretty helpful. Also, getting typed, talking with famous people, he's great. And he's a good friend of mine. I love Eric. Rachel's great. They're both wonderful. It's wonderful to have a conversation. I found the experience of being typed very cathartic. It almost felt a little bit like a therapy session. So if you can afford it, then that's definitely a way to go. Also, ask people. Even if you have friends or family members, even if they're not like super into typology, read them the type descriptions, knowing that you are describing architects, and that not any type description is going to match anybody perfectly. But just going off the architects, going off the rough abstracts, ask people that you know who have known you for a long time and who know you well if they think one of them makes more sense than another, and have a conversation about it. Oftentimes it is the case, particularly if you are a younger person. Shouldn't have even said that, because it's not age reliant, I don't think. So strike that. But It is hard. It's always harder to see yourself, and some people are more skilled at it than others. But even for the best person at it, it is still difficult to objectively see yourself. So checking in with other people can help out. Let's see. The other thing, which I thought was fascinating, was okay, so looking at, I'm not a huge socionics stan. Like, there are some parts of it that I like, there are plenty of parts of it that I do not. But one thing that I do find interesting, or two things, I guess, are the quadras and the intertype relationships. So, what I thought was interesting, dear commenter, is that of the four types that you listed, you had one from each of the quadras, which I thought was cool because you had said possibly INTP, which is from the alpha quadra. You said possibly INFJ, which is from the beta quadra. You said possibly ISFP, which is gamma. And then you said possibly INFP, which is delta. So I would advise, okay, I would advise doing a little bit of looking into the quadras and sort of seeing if, like doing a vibe check on it. And now there's three adjectives sort of assigned to each of the quadras. And initially, they don't sound like they make a whole lot of sense. Like for alpha quadra, it's judicious, merry, and democratic. Well, certainly those are very descriptive words. I think that the words as they're typically used might be a little less than informative to the reality of what they're trying to relay. So by that, what I mean is that, let's see if I can get this going here. Where'd that go? Yeah. So for merry, for example, versus serious, merry is described as, amongst other things, good at noticing emotional background and perceiving the emotional aspect separate from the activity, whereas somebody who falls in the serious quadra, which the serious quadras are either gamma or delta, is bad at noticing the emotional background and maybe not as apt to separate the emotional vibe from the activity that's taking place. So alpha is judicious, merry, and democratic. Beta is decisive, merry, and aristocratic. Gamma is decisive, serious, and democratic, and delta is judicious, serious, and aristocratic. So I would say, dear commenter, that might be a good place to start as well. So you've got a couple of options for doing some self-inquiry in terms of looking at where you think your points of least resistance might be most obvious and then kind of backing into it from there, or also by doing a little bit of research on the quadras. I've given you a couple of interactive pieces of advice as well in terms of either checking with people who already know and like you, or if you have the financial privilege of being able to do so, of getting yourself typed. So I think that's about it. I think that's going to pretty much wrap it up. I think I've kind of talked about everything that I made all my little notes on. So I hope you found this interesting. I hope you find it helpful. Feel free to leave a comment below. And I look forward to hearing from you. As always, don't forget to be kind and gentle with yourself, and I will see you soon.